pretty dancers will shine on by our shore, and the Katy wakes sweet song echo blue water shore, but thy paths nevermore.
There's nothing like an island for my idea of a perfect expedition, and if the others leave you alone long enough, there's even time to get the day's notes written up. I never thought I'd find a place as remote as this in Britain, nor for that matter did I expect to hear the island shopkeeper singing such wonderful songs, which he had written and composed himself.
That will chant your requiem when the storms of the winter sweep down through our main.
In the winter, I gather it isn't always quite so pleasant. You may be cut off for anything up to 10 weeks, when the radio telephone is your only link. You can always phone from the post office. Telephone number Foula 1, the one and only. We have come to stay for a fortnight, and during that time it looks as if we shall be pretty busy. I've come here as one of a group of 15, all strangers to me at first, but not for long. Not much chance of minding your own business on an island as small as this. Being isolated from the rest of the world has also brought us very close to the 50 or so islanders, but more of that later. In a sense, we weren't strangers to Foula, for the Brathay Exploration Group has been making regular expeditions to the island every year since 1956, and our journey's end was a pleasant one. From the jetty at Ham Voe, we walked a couple of miles to Risty, a disused croft house made available to us by the Laird, at whose invitation Brathay first came to Foula. It's a pretty bleak spot at the best of times, and it isn't hard to see why the islanders left it. We soon found that one of our jobs was to continue the rebuilding of the place and make it habitable as a base for our field studies. There's something quite exciting about making a deserted part of the island come alive again.
We sailed across the ocean wide till Boston Bay came nigh, and anchored 3 miles off the shore to send some gear on high. A block of tow be hoisted up to send that gear up by. Now as we were progressing, an officer chanced by. Avast, a great man cried, and I will tell you why. That's not the way to hoist your gear upon a mast so high.
I always hoped for a bit of peace when I wasn't cooking, but it never worked out that way.
Come on, Derek, try to get up. Right, where's that lazy person?
There's a special kind of mouse that lives on Foula, and we were soon out studying its distribution. Some live on the summits, can't think how, but most of them are caught amongst the dry stone walls lower down. The traps don't hurt them, and once details are recorded, they're released again. Cunning creatures, these mice. They soon learn that a free breakfast is served daily in these traps. But our main work here is ornithology, and it was not long before we were put in the picture by one of our leaders, Edward Jackson of Durham University.
The fauna census has been rather difficult to undertake. Over the last few years we've managed to establish that there are some 7,000 or 8,000 occupied sites on the island. And we're trying to find out, by ringing, something about the movements of these birds from Foula to other parts of the world. Up to now we've only had one recovery in Newfoundland out of several hundreds ringed. and we shall continue ringing as many as possible in the hopes of getting further recoveries.
I soon found out that this may involve searching for them along the cliffs using one of the islanders' boats.
What sort of a job is it ringing them? Is it easy or what?
Oh, it's a terrible job. The young fulmars look very nice in the nest, all fluffy and very homely, but as soon as you get anywhere near them, they sit on their legs and put the head back and spit up all sorts of fish, half-digested fish, and fulmar oil up at you. Deadly accurate. And you generally find that you get your anoraks and your trousers quite coated in this stuff. The bonksy, or great skewer, it is more generally known, and is a comparatively rare seabird.
Don't know about being rare, but it certainly doesn't take things calmly if we go near the young ones.
Another important bird which we shall be ringing is the shag. To get to these birds, we have to go by way of the sneck of the Smalley, which is a great cleft in the rocks, some 200 feet deep. Now, the shags are also rather nauseating creatures, and they live at the bottom of the cliffs amongst boulders which have fallen down from the cliffs as a result of landslides, and they do live in great filth. The whole place is a real mess.
That is easy because you're ready for that. Yeah, Fred.
Then there's the red-throated diver, rather like my old headmaster, always popping up in unexpected places.
Well, bird watching on Foula is more or less a 24-hour job. We catch these stone petrels by placing mist nets along the grassy slopes, and the birds just fly into these in the dark, not being able to see the netting at all.
We're doing most of the bird work from a tented camp in the south end of the island. Fat lot of good trying to keep a diary here. You don't keep a diary, you have to anchor it. Some of our nearest neighbours are the Greys. A two-storey house is something of a rarity on Foula, but what is even rarer is a garden sufficiently sheltered to have a lot of flowers.
Alla sånt här musik. And any has smash strong smash.
That's right, yeah.
And that you see like stuff like that.
I asked Mrs. Gray what the secret was, and she told me that the seedlings are planted in stone circles called planticribs until they are strong enough to be bedded out. In Foula, even a boat needs protection. When the winter comes, they haul up the mail boat on the davits and then pull it to the top of the concrete slipway to be clear of the storms. This morning I met the schoolmaster and missionary to the island, Alistair Holborn, and he told me some interesting things about the island.
Although the population in the early 1800s was well over 300, you must remember that their standard of living was extremely low. This decline in population can be traced to a large number of factors. Principal is the disappearance of the fish, so that now the lobsters are the only paying fish crop that we have.
A block of dough be hoisted up to send that gate up high. Now as we were progressing, an officer can spy. Avast, a great man cried, and I will tell you why. That's not the way to hoist your gear upon a mast so high. I'll tell to you another way which you will have to try. The block came down and killed my chum, a handstick quick through I. Soon that officer quite dead down at my feet.
All these things have produced a lack of manpower. That is the real crux of the problem of whether Foula can survive or not. At the moment we have 16 young people, and if they stay in the island, then Foula can continue. The other end, we have a very high proportion of old people. But in the middle, there is a lack of people to do the work that is necessary. And that is where the Brathay Group are so helpful. The peats, which are the fuel of the island and essential to the island, entail a tremendous amount of work. If you only have 4 young men, it's practically impossible for them to get through the work at the time that it is required. So when Brathay comes and helps us, puts it on, they're of immense value to the economy of the island.
But whatever we may do for the islanders is more than made up for by their hospitality. And it will be a long time before we forget that party.
Any place which sees nobody but its own inhabitants tends to get into a mental state. And so the coming of Brathay people is looked forward to by everybody, and the friendliness is of great value in keeping up our morale.
If you want to meet anyone on Foula, The best place to go is the jetty about midday on a day when a boat's due in. They'll all be there, including Robbie Icepister, collecting a few extras for his shop. Open 3 days a week, 4 to 7 p.m. But it isn't long before life returns to its more usual tempo, and it's amazing the way time goes chatting to folk. And while the boat's over from the mainland, we sometimes also meet the crew of the Herta, including skipper Hansie Smith. I've never counted the miles I walk each day, but they must be quite a few. Foula's only road is probably the most walked-on road in Britain. It's a strange mixture of progress and decay, the old surrounded by the new, the adaptable by the unadaptable. But there's one place where the spirit is not lacking. In August every year, when the minister is away, the Brathay group is asked to take the service. We felt some trepidation when we found that almost the whole island looked like turning up.
Man goeth forth unto his work and to his labour until the evening. O Lord, how manifold are thy works! In wisdom hast thou made them all. The earth is full of thy riches.
In spite of its isolation, things are looking up on Foula. Among the recent improvements, I gather that more cattle are being introduced to reduce the dependence on sheep. But it was the sheep which provided one of our most exciting days on the island, one I shall always remember. We all took part in a cruy, or roundup, which turned out to be the biggest gathering they'd had for years.
Where people used to pray.
Jag stänger det för lite. Mycket som man hör. Står ni där?
They have quite a number of ways of getting the fleece. Clipping with shears is a rarity, and most people prefer Mrs. Gear's method with the knife. But the old traditional method of ruing is still quite common. Off home on our boat tomorrow. Such a lot has happened that it doesn't seem as though we have only been here 2 weeks. Our share in the work on the birds has led to the ringing so far of over 2,000 this season. The work at times was far from pleasant, and the weather didn't always help. But on the other hand, we were compensated by working under exciting and sometimes hazardous conditions. At the other end of the island, work on Risti has gone well and will give our successors the useful base they want. But most of all, we have grown to know and respect the people of Foula. We shall not easily forget their kindness and hospitality, and we shall all be very sorry to say goodbye. But I hope it won't be too long before we meet again.